Obviously, by now, everyone knows about the post office scandal. Probably, if not one of the biggest ongoing, still ongoing, really, injustices that happened over a decade, if not more, at this point, to a number of people who were innocent because of a computer failure, which they knew full well about, as we've known about this, and all this has come out. Would not surprise me if there's still more, quite honestly, to come out about this. Um, and there's some interesting ramifications, of course, about this, because now you've got a situation where Fujitsu, the company obviously behind the Horizon system, heavily obviously bidding for other UK contracts, very, very much now out of favor with UK sort of public sector contracts. And of course, now other contracts that they've bid for with other computer systems now also in question, now having to look at those. Now, this could potentially open the UK public sector to more um, software companies, big software companies, which, okay, fine. However, remember, we are in attempting at this moment in time, or at least the government is trying its best to try and get a public sector work, or at least a trade deal, shall we say, with India. If they manage to do this, this then will potentially very, very much open the door for things like Infos. Of course, Rishi Sunak heavily connected to Infos. So again, I would say this is very much a conspiracy theory, but I have seen people sort of say this, that the whole reason that the post office scandal became a thing was that this was pushed by Rishi Sunak to get Fujitsu out, so this could open the door for his own company. That again, his father-in-law, his sort of owns, could get them more into this. I think that's a bit of a conspiracy theory. I think that's a bit of a stretch. There isn't any evidence to say that that's the case, but I do worry that this would open up this sector to a lot of these giant Indian companies that are involved in the tech sector, and of course, this would pull jobs away from the UK tech sector here to India. This is something that India does when it tries to do trade deals to try and sort of open up these sort of areas and industries where it can sort of pull jobs away into India, because it knows that, well, the cost of hiring a UK worker versus an Indian worker is far, far cheaper. And, well, at the end of the day, there are going to be a lot of big companies and corporations that are going to do that. And of course, if you're bidding for public sector contracts, as we've seen for the past number of years, if you are entering the lowest amount of to do a contract, well, of course, where are you going to go? Where are you going to base your centers to do the work? Well, if the trade deal now says, heck, you can do these things in India, all of a sudden your price for bidding for those public sector contracts can become a lot cheaper, and of course you can gain a lot more profit from those deals. Again, one of the reasons why trade deals should become a big issue once again in our politics, and we'll probably see that happen as we sort of continue in our post-Brexit transitory journey. But there you go. So anyway, we're going to have a look today at Computer Weekly, because Computer Weekly, obviously one of the original places that broke the Post Office Horizon scandal, next to Private Eye, in many cases. In fact, I think it was originally Computer Weekly who did break this story originally, but they are having a look at this, about how this now might open up the UK public sector to very much other big Indian companies who, bear in mind, in the past have had very similar outcries to Fujitsu for, well, cutting corners and trying to cover things up that have wrongfully happened. So, hey, we'll have a look at what's going on here in this article. But before we do go on into that, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. Of course, down below, there's the Buy Me Coffee link. There is the Patreon page. There is the YouTube thank you button. And of course, there is the Pony Club as well down below. Almost forgot. But there we go. So anyway, on we go to Computer Weekly to have a look at this. So, post office scandal fallout for Fujitsu could see the UK public sector open to Indian giants. So, IT services companies are now primed to sweep up the UK public sector if Fujitsu's huge share of the sector now declines amid the fury over its role in the post office scandal. Bear in mind, I think that should absolutely be the case. I think anything that Fujitsu is now involved in the public sector should be heavily scrutinized and looked at. So, suppliers such as India's Tata Consultancy Services, TCS, is already a giant in the UK and global corporate sector, but it now stands to benefit if Fujitsu UK's public sector legacy begins to crumble. Since the ITV drama raised the profile of the Post Office Horizon scandal, Fujitsu, like the UK government, has been forced to act. Nothing new was revealed in the Mr. Bates versus the Post Office drama, which aired in the first weeks of 2024, but it did provide that public anger and the campaign for justice needed to force the government into action. And it's shocking that it took that program to get it into action. But hey, I suppose it should be, praised in multiple ways that it did finally really galvanize such public anger to get the government to act. So, in many ways, it's a shame that we had to get that far, but in many ways, it's also a good thing at the same time, especially for the victims of the post office scandal as well. So, Fujitsu stood by and watched and even supported the post office. And it used data from its error-prone computer system as evidence to prosecute some postmasters and demand money it said was missing, when it was actually a result of errors in the Horizon accounting software as it supplied to the post office. It was not long after the drama caused the public outrage that Fujitsu, for the first time, admitted its part in the scandal, apologized it, and promised to pay towards the cost of financial redress, and said it would support victims and their families. Again, interesting to see how they would go about doing that. Computer did ask Fujitsu for its comments ever since 2008, but it has only offered no comment at every single attempt. The shamed Japanese supplier put all of its public sector bidding on hold, and while the statutory public inquiry into the post office scandal goes about its work. Fujitsu does have a huge UK public sector business for its IT services. In the 1990s, it took over the British computer company ILC with a significant contracts with the government, including with the post office. And the lure of the huge post office contract was an incentive for Fujitsu to take over ILC. Despite its involvement in the scandal, Fujitsu has continued to be awarded lucrative contracts by the UK government. Last year, it was awarded an IT service contract by the Home Office, HM Revenues and Customs Service, and the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. Fujitsu will be paid over £250 million by the HMRC to replace an in-house service, and the Foreign and Commonwealth Office has contracted it to provide network and communication services with a deal worth over £184 million. The Home Office is paying over £48 million to support the technology underpinning the police national database. And one of the things here is I have no problem with, governments going and securing contracts with outside companies. That's fine. But one thing I would always say that especially now, and I think it's not only just the case of things like these IT services, but it's the same for rail services, a lot of things that we have lost a lot of the expertise the government really needs in-house. It should have an in-house IT, not only just a service department to look after computer services, but it should be going and looking at these contracts saying, well, okay, is this value for money? Are they providing the services that we are accurately paying for? Businesses do this all the time. I can't see why the government should not be doing this itself. Now, we do have, of course, the National Audit Office, but because that expertise does not exist inside the government, they then have to go outside, hire these contractors, which, cost hundreds of millions of pounds extra to hire just to have a look at these. You can see where there's a lot of waste, and that is because we have let that knowledge go from the civil service. And I think that is something that should be rebuilt up, not only just in the case of IT systems, but in rail services as well, and all whole other areas of sectors that we have lost that expertise in. So, according to figures from Trussell, it continues with Fujitsu now has active contracts with the UK government and public sector worth over £4 billion. The biggest of these is worth nearly over 2.4 billion. And the suppliers deal to supply the post office with the Horizon system has been contracted, has now been phasing it out with the post office ongoing project to replace the very controversial system. So the use of the IOC made large government contracts gave Fujitsu a ready-made accredited accreditation to supply government organizations. The same cannot be said for the likes of India's TCS, which for many years said there were fears over the outsourcing of work of its IT suppliers based in India. The perception was that the confidential data would then not be safe, and there were also concerns that job in the UK would be moved to India, as we said at the beginning. This is being the big thing that India, especially in its trade deals, has been trying to do to sort of move all these things and information. And especially when you're having big government departments having that information, if it is going to be based in India, isn't necessarily going to be 100% safe, especially if you're looking at things like the Foreign Office being involved with a foreign company. That raises a lot of worrying questions about the safety and security and even national security ramifications with India, because hey, we know that India hasn't been well, it's been very neutral in its regards. But what if India were to come into, let's say this was going on and India got that information? Would India then maybe pass that information on to Russia, to Vladimir Putin? Again, you can see the concerns that should be asked about all this. But TCS, for example, was invested heavily in over the years, employing over 23,000 people in the UK. This has now begun to build a very public sector-based business in the UK, and TCS already boasts the world's biggest corporations as its customers. But its UK public sector business has remained very, very small in comparison with its private sector work. Now trusted in the UK, TCS is increasingly playing its targeted sector public role customers, and any of Fujitsu's losses could be its gain. Infos and Wipro are other examples of Indian heritage suppliers now seeking public sector opportunities in the UK. Speaking to Computer Weekly about TCS UK plans, Amit Gupta, its UK country head, said that there was a potential and potential and put and put and potos pure I can't even know what the word is, and action with quote good engagement. TCS already provides services to the Department of Work and Pension sector, and organisations is provider of Nest Development Education, the BBC, Cardiff City Councils, and of course local governments. Gupta said that there has already been a percentage of its UK business public sector share in its single digits, but it has now grown a lot recently. And of course, given the names of its customers in the sector, it has potential for future growth with existing new customers, it said. Growth could be seen eventually by the likes of TCS with the takeover of huge contracts of major government departments such as HMRC and the Home Office. And again, I would be very, very wary of giving out such big public sector contracts, because I think questions should be asked, especially in the rounds of like national security information about what access, foreign governments potentially would have into that. But I'm sure these questions have already been asked. But again, it's still worrying. However, Sam Kennington, the UK head of IT services of firms EDS, said that the CEO is now a software service company of Zentech, said that Fujitsu's future in the UK is now very uncertain. Whatever a company comes under this type of much security, it has to consider all the options, it said. This would include refocusing its customers targeting and even leaving the country. Kennington also argued that the current problems being faced by Fujitsu in the UK could absolutely give opportunities to its competitors such as TCS. Mark Lewis, an IT services expert and lawyer and a senior consultant at Sharps Howardson, said that TCS is a good shout for a company now picking up the government business from Fujitsu. He said, "I would broaden this to a similar 2-tier or even 3 Indian players picking up smaller contracts." He said that in Europe, there now could be other opportunities for such as Campinari. So, yeah, we'll see what happens in this area and where these contracts go to. But I think in the light of what people have raised, and I think very legitimate concerns about obviously Rishi Sunak having links to one of the biggest firms in India, Infos, being so connected, I think we should be very, very much watching out what happens, because it wouldn't be the first time that people have brought up concerns about Sunak trying to hold on, trying to get this Indian trade deal done, for his own, personal private benefit. That is a question I think that should be asked, and I think should be scrutinized. I think quite heavily, but there you go. We'll see what happens in regards to this. But I do agree. I think Fujitsu's future, um, very, very much in doubt. Very, very much in doubt. And it would not shock me to see them leave the country under such, a dark cloud. And you would obviously, I think, expect now to see other countries looking at their Fujitsu systems in the wake of this, also looking at them saying, well, hold on, has a similar thing happened to us? Are we potentially looking at these types of IT systems? It's not beyond the realms of possibility this might happen. This may crop up. You have now Fujitsu going to have a very difficult time, because that is something that's going to be with them for quite some time. It is a very, very bad corporate look for them. I am glad at least they are now wanting to help the post office victims, although, as was said, they have very much stood by the post office numerous times, even though they know and knew, from what we can tell, they knew there were errors in the system. So we'll see what happens going forward. But yeah, Fujitsu not going to have a very good time, I think, in the UK going forward. But that's understandable, and of course, for obvious reasons. But as always, let me know what you think down below. So as always, thank you very much for watching, and of course, as always, we can see you all next time.